Good evening, and welcome to the Christian Business League's MasterClass Series tonight featuring Dr. Julian Earls. As we join this evening, we want to welcome everyone who has joined us on this Zoom presentation and ask now that you would bow your heads with us in a moment of prayer. Most gracious God, we praise and honor your name. We thank you for this opportunity of gathering together. We thank you, Lord God, for Dr. Julian Earls and for his enormous commitment to this community and to the world. Bless now, God, as we gather together. Open our hearts to all that you have for us tonight, that we might glean everything that you desire for us. In the mighty name of Jesus, we ask it all. Amen. I'm extremely excited tonight to have sharing with us our great sponsor, PNC Bank, and Mr. Michael J. Taylor, who will come to us at this time.
Well, thank you, Reverend Sadler, and good evening, everyone. PNC is certainly proud and pleased to be your longtime sponsor of the Christian Business League. And I always believe that our sponsorship kind of represents our commitment to doing business in a righteous way. When I think about doing business in a righteous way from a professional standpoint, I identify with being honest and being transparent and also being consultative, but also through our community outreach that we ensure that our products and services are available in all segments of our market, including the African American community and community of colors. And that our particular bank has grown over our sponsorship time. I believe probably 7 or 8 years ago we were around a $150 billion bank, and now we're upward of $500 billion bank that stretch across the nation. And my role for PNC is I manage our community and economic development group, where I support the Midwest market, where there's over 50 communities among 9 states. And so maybe our size and scope can surprise you a tad. And if that's the case, that's a good thing, because we try to maintain our Main Street approach, that we are in the community and we meet our customers where they're at. I would like to just very quickly just give you 3 particular activities that have been quite prevalent, for us going into this year and going into the next. One is our $1.5 billion racial equity and social justice initiative, where we're helping to end systemic racism and to encourage economic empowerment in African American communities. We also have launched our $88 billion commitment. And that is really, we launched it, but it's really going to take steam in 2022. And that's based on our recent acquisition of BBVA, that once again has given us a presence throughout the nation. And then one of our flagship kind of products, it's kind of revolutionary, I would say. It's kind of a game changer, if I would say. It's a tool that will allow for you to control your checking account. Theoretically, what it's doing, it's really putting an end to this $17 billion that consumers pay for overdraft fees. So theoretically, you control your checking account. So if you make you have an error or whatever, you're short in cash flow and whatever it may be, you decide on what check you're going to pay and when that check will get put back in to eliminate some of the overdraft fees. Once again, very revolutionary, and I believe that it's a game changer. But now to our Mastercraft program, where I have the honor to introduce you to a gentleman who will be introducing, our presenter. And our person who will be presenting to you to introduce our keynote address would be Dr. Guy Bluford, a former astronaut and a very talented individual. Mr. Bluford was the first African American to go into space. His shuttle mission STS-8 was the first night launch in NASA. And his life particular achievements have been a game changer in itself. So I would like to push it over to Dr. Guy Bluford to introduce our MasterCraft speaker of the day.
Dr. Bluford, you are muted.
Let's try that again. Sorry. Thanks, Michael. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce Julian Earls. I have a distinct honor and privilege to introduce Julian this evening. You know that Julian is very popular and admired in the Cleveland area. Julian is smart. He's got a doctorate in physics. He's written 31 technical proposals, and he is Dr. Julian Earls. Julian is articulate. He's a highly sought after speaker at various venues, including colleges and universities. And if you ever hear Julian talk, you'll be highly impressed and entertained. Julian is generous, both with his time and treasure and his support for Black caucuses, primarily students and Black universities studying science and engineering. Julian is also a leader. He led the NASA Research Center, one of the largest organizations at Cleveland. Julian is athletic. He's run 27 marathons, including the Boston Marathon. And finally, Julian is respected by all for his integrity and honesty in dealing with others. Julian is a remarkable person. I first met Julian in 1978. I was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'd gotten selected for the astronaut program, and after several weeks, I got a call from Julian Earls. I had never met Julian Earls. He called to congratulate me on becoming an astronaut. I told Julian at the time that I was running an engineering branch. I was trying to complete my dissertation, and I have all these speaking engagements which I couldn't fill. He encouraged me to complete my dissertation prior to going to Houston. Several years later, as an astronaut, I came to NASA Lewis and had an opportunity to speak to the employees at NASA Lewis about flying in the space program. Julian was the one who introduced me in the crowd. In Julian's introduction, he said that he and I were born on the exact same day. I thought, wow, I got a twin brother up here in Cleveland, Ohio. How fortunate am I that I have a twin brother up here in Cleveland named Julian. In 1993, when I left the astronaut program after flying 4 times in space, I spoke with Julian about what should I do after leaving NASA. He recommended I came to Cleveland, which I did, and start a business career here in Cleveland. And I've been in Cleveland for the last 25 years. For me, Julian is a mentor, a role model, a wise sage, a confident, and above all, he is a friend. I'm proud and honored this evening to introduce my long-lost twin brother from another mother, Dr. Julian Earls.
Dr. Earls, what an extraordinary introduction by Dr. Guy Bluford, a man who needs no introduction, one of the great historic figures of our land. And we're so proud to have had him to introduce you tonight. That speaks to who Dr. Julian Earls is, a man introduced by someone who has been out of this world. And so tonight, we're going to talk to a man whose gifts and whose talents and whose accomplishments are truly out of this world, Dr. Julian Earls.
Firstly, let me thank Guy. What Guy did not tell you is that he does not lead with his ego. Guy is one of the select group of astronauts who has an earned PhD. And following his career as an astronaut, he set new standards and raised being an executive in a science, technology, engineering, and management company to a new level. And Guy has always been there for our people and is just my hero. And as a matter of fact, what he didn't tell you was I applied to be an astronaut the same year Guy applied to be an astronaut. Well, it came down to the fact that Guy was born at 10 a.m. in the morning. I was born at 4:15 in the afternoon. And NASA decided they would go with the old man. That's why Guy ended up being the astronaut rather than Julian Earls. Thanks, Guy.
Dr. Earls, that's an extraordinary story, an extraordinary story. Dr. Earls, let's get right into the meat of our conversation tonight. You have done so many amazing things in your life. You have been the center director of the NASA Glenn Research Center, the first African-American to hold the position. And you have been an executive in residence at Cleveland State University. Leaving NASA Glenn, going to Cleveland State University, you would think you would be ready to relax, but you went to Cleveland State University and you led several schools while you were there and then started a school. Now, how did you go from being a brilliant physicist, director of NASA Glenn Research Center, to starting a public charter school?
Let me just make one correction. I was the second African-American center director. There was a fellow named Don Campbell. Don Campbell was the first African-American center director at NASA Glenn. I was his deputy, and upon his retirement, I became the center director. When I left NASA, I decided that I was going to retire. My bride of 59 years, Zenobia, tells people that I flunked retirement. So I went to Cleveland State, intending to stay a few years, but I was called upon to do some things, and I served 3 presidents at Cleveland State. The first was to begin a public school on the campus of Cleveland State University, and I led the effort that established the Campus International School. What was interesting was there was no building on campus, no location, no faculty. So we had to start from scratch, and I co-chaired the committee that got that moving. What's also interesting is God working in mysterious ways. We needed a location for it. And Reverend Paul, you know, Dr. Ken Chalker. He had moved his church to University Circle, the United Methodist Church, and had vacated the building on 30th and Euclid. He graciously allowed us to use the back school of that church to start the Campus International School. We started with kindergarten, first and second grade with an international baccalaureate curriculum. And today we have a brand new building on Cleveland State's campus for grades K through 8. And also I was able to start an MC² STEM high school on the campus at Cleveland State University. Those students in the 9th grade were at Great Lakes Science Center. The 10th grade, they were at G.E. Neal Park. But there was no location for the STEM high school in Cleveland. So I headed the effort to bring the MC² STEM high school to Cleveland State University campus.
An amazing story, but it's a testament, Dr. Earls, to your ingenuity, a testament to your versatility, because you were able to go from administration in one area, in one field, to administration in a completely different field, utilizing your gift of creativity and your background in education and all of the skills that you had gleaned over the many years of working in administration to be able to do some things that had never been done before in the city of Cleveland. And young students today can thank you for that, because you did that. Speaking of students, Dr. Earls, you received your first degree at Norfolk State University, one of the great historically Black colleges of this land. Do you believe that there was something unique about the preparation that you received there?
Well, yes, but before we get to that, although you're giving me great credit, the only thing I was wise enough to do was surround myself with people who were smarter than I. So everything that was accomplished because there was a team that pulled together to make those things happen. And you shouldn't get me started on HBCUs. I went to Norfolk State out of high school and decided that I wanted to be an electrical engineer. Norfolk State did not have a program in electrical engineering, but one professor there, Dr. Roy Woods, who became like a second father, explained to me that if I majored in physics, that physicists often work as engineers, but it's unusual for engineers to work as physicists. And that's how I became a physics major at Norfolk State University. But it did so much for me. My mentors were there, but most importantly was I found a bride at Norfolk State. Zenobia and I married for 59 years, and we married at the end of our sophomore year at Norfolk State. I had no degree, no permanent job, no real home. People tell me, boy, you had no nothing. By the time I finished Norfolk State and went to the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry, we had our firstborn son. We had graduated. Z stayed in Norfolk taking care of our son before joining me in Rochester, New York. And then years later, when I went off to the University of Michigan, years after that, when I went to the Harvard Business School, by that time we had two sons. And we decided that Z would not interrupt her career as a Cleveland school teacher. So she took care of those two kids while I would come home most weekends. So as many people have heard me say, I borrow from Gladys Knight and used to be Pips, because I say if anyone should ever write my life story, for whatever reason there might be, Zenobia will be between each line of pain and glory, because she's the best thing that happened to me. I tell people not only is she the wind beneath my wing, but she's the chocolate chips in my cookies. Okay? And I simply say, I didn't realize how much that woman had done for me until she went to work on her graduate degree at John Carroll, and I was stuck with those two demons. Okay? The lady should be canonized for taking care of those two guys. But yeah, Norfolk State gave me the undergirding that I needed, educational wise and otherwise.
Dr. Earls, speaking of your children, your two sons, amazingly accomplished young men, by the way, far from demons. But tell us a little bit about some of the accomplishments. I know some of the story because I have been blessed to hear, and one of your sons is a fellow Howardite. But tell us about some of the things that your sons have done.
Well, I'm very proud, and I give Z tremendous amount of all the credit for what has happened. Julian, our older son, went to Howard University. And after finishing Howard University, he came back to Case Western Reserve Medical School. Then he went to the University of Maryland, became the first Black chief resident in the history of the University of Maryland. Married his college sweetheart, Dr. Pamela Earls now, who is an optometrist, and they reside in Macon, Georgia, and have given us the prize of our life, our two grandbabies, Madison and Mariah. Gregory followed Zenobia and me to Norfolk State, majored in mass communications. Finally, Gregory ended up at the American Film Institute for graduate school studies, one of only two Black students out of the 125 students at the American Film Institute. And Greg works in the film industry out in Hollywood. But what's interesting about HBCUs is many people are familiar with the book Hidden Figures. Those three African-American women, I worked with them. They were in an organization that I had the pleasure of being a national president of, the National Technical Association. So those three women, we worked together. Margot Lee Shetterly, who wrote the book Hidden Figures, calls me Uncle Julian. Why? Because her father, Bob Lee, and I were classmates in physics at Norfolk State University. Therefore, that's the connection. Now, if you happen to go see the movie Hidden Figures and you sit and watch the credits, you will see our younger son, Gregory Earls' name come on the screen because he worked on the film in post-production. So I'm looking at HBCUs, and not only did they serve Zenobia and me well, but our sons as well.
That's tremendous. That is a tremendous testament to the great education that is received at our historically Black colleges and universities. And you and your family are examples of that education and what results from it, the kind of service and commitment to the community that comes from that.
Not only that, well, I have to compliment you because you're a graduate of Howard University. And you're one of the pastors that I've maintained that oftentimes people want to be pastors because they say they want to serve, but then they get to be pastors and then they want to be served. What is unique about you is that you become a pastor and you are in fact serving people in your congregation and serving the community as well, and the creator of this Christian Business League. So I'm proud to call you my pastor.
Thank you, Dr. Earls. It's very kind of you to say that. Dr. Earls, one of the things that we know is that none of us get where we get in life without help. And you've already said that. You've shared that you gather around you people who are smarter than yourself. And that's one of the rules to success in any field. Find folks smarter than yourself, make that your team, gather them around you. If I were to ask you who were the 3 great influences in your life, who would they be?
I have to first start with my parents. My mother only went through the 8th grade. My father had a 3rd grade education. But as I tell people, they were not uneducated. They were self-educated. Mm-hmm. Some of the most profound lessons in life I learned from them. I remember that my mother used to say, you should get enough education so you never have to look up to anybody, and then get a little bit more so you'll be wise enough not to look down on anybody either. They also used to talk about education and common sense. They used to say education without common sense is like a load of books on the back of a jackass. If you have to choose between education and common sense, choose common sense. And I've been fortunate to work with people who've been blessed with both. So my parents certainly were just the ultimate role models, mentors. When I went to Norfolk State, there was Dr. Roy Woods, professor of physics, who became like a second father to me. And every major decision that I made in my life in terms of my career was with the guidance of Dr. Roy Woods. And he passed away several years ago, but he's typical of what happens at HBCUs. We always end up with someone who picks us up and causes us to be more than we ever imagined that we could be. So that was the case at undergraduate. When I got to NASA, I really ended up with two mentors. When I started with NASA, there was a deputy director of the center who was a white male who had grown up in Richmond, Virginia, and he sort of adopted me. You know, I love to tell people that all Black folks are not your friends and all white folks are not your enemies. That what one must do is recognize that there are people who are quality people regardless of color. So he mentored me and even promoted me while I was away in graduate school. And my career really took off at NASA as a result of those two people. And Edward Richley became a close friend as well. He passed away recently, but everything that I did in terms of promotions within NASA was because of those two. And today, I really have formed partnerships with people across the board. Dr. Ken Chalk, I mentioned, Dr. Chalk and I get together on a monthly basis, and he provides support for me in counseling, and we just enjoy each other. I'm also with an organization, Entrepreneurial Engagement Ohio. A dear friend, John Clipwell, is a retired administrator executive with American Greetings. Years ago, he and I decided that we needed to do something to get high school students engaged in STEM and entrepreneurship. Between the two of us with our organization, we garnered $7 million over the years to provide scholarships to students who in high school. And John is a staunch Republican. I'm a staunch Democrat, but we managed to work together. I call us the Newt Gingrich and Al Sharpton of Ohio in terms of our being able to work together. And by the way, Dr. Woodrow Whitlow, who followed me as the center director at NASA, Glenn, is also a member of the board of this Entrepreneurial Engagement Ohio company. So that's my philosophy, a long answer to what should have been a short answer to your question.
So one of the things that I know about you is that not only have you had great mentors, but you've mentored many, many, many people. Do you have a philosophy of mentoring?
Well, my philosophy, I really believe, is just summed up in one word: help. That any way that I believe I can help someone, I believe I'm obligated to do that. And when I think about people that I've mentored, it has been a reciprocal relationship. For example, many years ago, I was almost destroyed at NASA. I was removed from my management position based upon an attack that was made against me as I was being considered for a high-level position. People went on TV with distorted voices, blacked out silhouettes, claiming that I had been a racist in reverse, that in my leadership role that I had promoted Black people, Hispanics who were not qualified, that I had accepted kickbacks from contractors and so forth. Well, the employees at NASA rolled up. Dallas Lauderdale, who is a pastor now, Dr. Ricky Shine, who was at NASA. They were two of the people that put their careers on the line to fight for me, and got Congressman Stokes and Congresswoman Mary Rose Okar to, in fact, fight that battle. And someone said that, what's the biblical? Make your enemies your footstool.
That's right.
After being attacked like that, I ended up not only becoming the Director of Administration Computer Services, but Deputy Director and Center Director. So those are the people. And then just at our outing, our golf outing last Saturday, there's a young woman who approached me. She's a first-year law student at Case Western Reserve. I taught her mother math at Tri-C. So that tells you how old I am, right? That people I've mentioned, their children are now in graduate school, law school, and teaching and other careers.
So if based on all of that knowledge and insight and the mentoring that you have done, we are in a pivotal time in the city of Cleveland. We are on the threshold of some bold, new, young leadership ascending to positions of highest authority in our city. What advice would you give the young Black leadership coming on the scene today that who will step into the positions that have been previously held by the old guard, not only in our city, but across the country?
Well, some things I tell people, especially when they're starting off in their careers, is that the best way to get to the next position is give 100% to the position you hold. Sometimes people can become so focused on where they want to go that they neglect where they are. The other thing I do is I talk about Black leadership is if you really want to measure the quality of Black leadership, look at who replaces those leaders when they leave. When I left NASA Glenn, I found a pure genius, Dr. Woodrow Whitlow,
yes,
who became my successor, and by the way, a new member of Mount Zion.
That's right.
Well, what had happened was when I became center director, I wanted Woodrow to be my deputy. So I told the administrator of NASA that I wanted Woodrow to be my deputy. He invited me to come down to Washington and bring Woodrow with me because he had not met him. Woodrow has a bachelor's, master's, PhD out at MIT. Well, after sitting in the room listening to the administrator talk for about 40 minutes, Woodrow looked at me and said, I think I heard him say, I'm going to be the deputy director at Kennedy Space Center, not Glenn. And that was it. The administrator didn't want the center director and deputy coming from the same center. Well, subsequently, when I was about to retire, the new administrator asked me about a successor. Now, it is unusual for an administrator to ask a NASA Center director who's retiring to recommend his own successor. I recommended Dr. Woodrow Whitlow. And therefore, when I left, Glenn was in the more than capable hands of a Dr. Woodrow Whitlow. Now, I tell people that if you aren't in the business of grooming people and preparing people and helping people to take over the position that you have, then you're useless in that position. If you rise to positions of power and influence and don't use that power and influence to help your people, then as far as I'm concerned, you don't deserve that. So my advice to leaders, make sure you're a servant leader, and then make sure that you're grooming people to follow you when you move on to the next position. David Whitehead did that. When David Whitehead left as vice president of the First Energy, there was an African-American female that replaced him. He had groomed her for that.
I think that is wisdom. It's brilliance. It is the key. I have watched other cities and entities, corporations, where there has been success is where there has been a succession plan. One of our participants tonight wrote into the chat just a second ago, succession planning is key. And that's the truth. It's absolutely the truth. You're also right. The sign of leadership is preparing the next person to take your place, not trying to enshrine yourself so that when you're gone, no one will be able to replace you. The key is to prepare the next person to take your place so that the entity, whatever it is, whether it's an institution or a church or a city, can go on from strength to strength and greatness to greatness, so that you don't find yourself in a position where we're not ready, not aware of what's going to happen next.
Yeah,
because we can't afford to do that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the other thing I tell our people is that they need to share their knowledge, skills, and ability. I taught at Tri-C for 27 years. I taught math and physics, and I cultivated young people to, in fact, become employees at NASA. I remember distinctly some lessons I learned there. There was a young woman who I always tried to teach the history of physics to make my course learnable and relevant. And on one test, after 10 problems, I wrote, "What can you tell me about the great physicists of the 18th century?" Well, this young lady wrote, "They're all dead." Well, I just give her credit. The answer is correct. So one lesson I learned is in life, often it is more important to know the right questions than to know the right answers. I encouraged her to go on and get a degree, finish Tri-C and move on for a 4-year degree. Well, she complained that she was from a broken home, that she had to wait for her mother to get home to take care of children. And I counseled her that a broken home is not a home with a single parent. A broken home is a home without love. Too many successful people have been reared for us to start writing people off and call them, at-risk children and so forth because of a single parent. She then said to me, "Well, how long will it take to get a degree going part-time?" I told her 8 or 9 years. Her response was, 9 years? You know how old I'll be in 9 years. My response was, "Young lady, you will be the same age in 9 years, whether or not you attend college. 9 years later, you'll look back and say, if I started then, I would be through by now." So our people tell people, look, don't ever get caught in life saying how much better off you would be if you had done something that was completely under your control in the first place. Finally, she said, "I'm too old to start working on a degree." I reminded her that the Roman scholar Cato started to study Greek when he was 80 years old. Someone asked, "Why would you start to study a different language at the age of 80? Cato's response was, 80 is the earliest age I have left to start. So I tell people, whatever your age is at this moment, is the earliest age for you to start doing some things you want to do. Foreign language, an exercise program. You don't have to run marathons, but walking 20 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week. studying a different language, whatever it is, now is the earliest time you have to start.
Dr. Earls, you have been honored in so many areas of life. You have received many awards and many achievements, including being a Christian Business League trailblazer, and one of our first, in fact. And you received numerous honorary degrees. I was present when you received an honorary degree from my alma mater, Howard University, and you received your honorary degree just before the keynote speaker, Oprah Winfrey, got up to deliver her speech. And when you got up, you were as brilliant and as articulate as always. And you told a story about a turtle on a fence post. And I remember the story vividly. You tell it to our audience. What did you tell the whole gathered congregation of the Howard University community about a turtle on a fence post?
Well, it wasn't original for me. I was honored in Portsmouth, Virginia, and the keynote speaker was the author Roots. And he said that his father told him, if you see a turtle sitting atop a fence post, you know it has some help. And I've used that, and that's when I talk about help I received from Z and my family and so forth. And I just make that statement all the time. And what surprised me was that Oprah decided to restate it in her commencement address. So I was pleased.
Yeah. Not only did she restate it, but she said, as Dr. Julian Earls said. And I was overwhelmed. I'm sitting there. The only person I personally knew on the platform was you. And for Oprah to quote you, I was at my chest was about to burst. I was so proud. And it was just amazing. And I love the fact that you were a graduate of Norfolk State. And Dr. Earls, for our audience, tells me all the time, the only reason I went to Howard is because I couldn't get in Norfolk State. But I want everybody, that's our big joke. But I do want everybody to know that this is a man who probably one of the most influential people in America looks up to. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. Dr. Earls, you've had a career as well as a public speaker, a motivational speaker, and you've spoken all over. One story that I would like to share is my children both went to Shaker Heights High School, and my daughter came home from school one day. She was a sophomore at Shaker Heights High School. She came home, she said, "Daddy, a man came to school today and he spoke and he looked real familiar." And I said, "What was his name?" "I can't remember his name." But then she went on to describe Dr. Julian Earls. Not only did she describe him, she described everything he had on, from his glasses to his jewelry to his shoes. She described everything about him and then began to quote things that you said. And then she said, "And he looks like somebody who goes to our church." And this was back in the old days when we were all going to Eastview United Church of Christ under the pastorate of our good friend and my frat brother. And so when I said, "Was it Dr. Earls?" She said, "Yes, that's who he was. He was really cool." So you have the ability to relate to people at every level. How do you do that, Dr. Earls?
Well, as I was saying something about hiring people smarter than I tell people that if you think you're the smartest person in the room, then the guarantee is you are not the smartest person in the room. And when it comes to students, you must not try to impress them. I believe that what you have to do is just deal honestly and openly with students and be there to provide support to them. I'm just humbled by the students that have come through and I've had an opportunity to touch their lives. There was years ago, NASA was having challenges with respect to African Americans in the trades programs. And we ended up going out to Plumbrook Station, Sandusky, Ohio. And this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And we ended up establishing 2 weeks of a camp with students from the inner city staying in tents. And we taught them math and mechanical aptitude, how to take tests and so forth. What's so interesting is just a few weeks ago, one of those former students invited me to come meet with him, and another former student, the two African-American males, invited me to come to an event that they were sponsoring. One of them owns his own CPA firm. The other one is a multi-millionaire plumber owning a plumbing outfit up in Detroit. And he told me that he was on a program and he was there with two people who were accomplished, both PhDs, if you will. And as the panel broke up and people were introduced, they were introducing themselves as panelists. He said, "I'm a plumber." When the program was over, everybody was lined up to talk to him as a tradesman, because what he had done was he had taken that technical knowledge that he got as a plumber, expanded it to own companies and own multi-companies in Detroit, as well as in Cleveland and down in Virginia, based upon his knowledge. And I tell people about a friend of mine who was an entertainer, and he was in Cleveland on a program and asked me to come down and be with him. And the moderator looked at him and said, "Well, Jerry, tell me how it feels. You and Dr. Earls grew up 2 doors from each other in Portsmouth, Virginia. Dr. Earls has a PhD and you don't." Jerry said, "Well, you know, if I want a PhD, I'll hire one." And I love it. And to this day, he and I are best friends. Whenever he produces an album or whatever, he always writes about me in the liner notes. But again, when it comes to not just interacting with students, but interacting with anyone, you just cannot lead with your ego. That's all. And when it comes to family, if you really want to be humble, go around your family, okay? See, where I grew up, there were 11 of us in my family, by the way. My dad didn't go out much at night, obviously, all right? But my oldest sister is 102 years old. There were 11 of us in the family, okay?
Wow.
Of the boys who were left, my oldest brother was a retired pastor in Virginia. My youngest brother, whom you met at our golf outing on Saturday, Robert, is the pastor of St. John Baptist Church in Virginia. I'm number 9, by the way. Robert is number 11. The brother who was number 10 was a pastor in Texas. He passed away several years ago. And I have, my brother Robert has 2 sons. One is an EMT firefighter. The other one you would find interesting is a religious comedian. I think I've given you his CD.
Yes,
He's
he's amazing.
Jason Earls, all right? And he's been to Cleveland in a number of times, but he's internationally known. Then I have the brother who is in Atlanta, who is absolutely a miracle. I mean, he's retired Navy and is a double amputee. But when you talk to Raymond, you would never know. He is spiritual. He has the hand of God who has touched him and his family, and it's just amazing. And a sister who lives there. Then I have nieces and nephews in Detroit, Michigan. I have cousins in New York, and all of these, both young nieces, nephews, and cousins and so forth, when it comes to family reunions, I get reinvigorated from being around them. And that causes me, I think, to have a relationship with young students as I get into high schools and so forth.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're going to prepare to transition into our question and answer period from the audience. And we want the audience to share their questions with us and write them directly in the chat. Write those questions directly in the chat. And I'm going to begin with a question that comes from a young person who's actually a student. And the question is, Dr. Earls, do you believe that the length of your marriage has had an impact on the success of your career?
Absolutely. I tell a story about going down to Virginia for a high school reunion, and during a break, going through a McDonald's and noticed one of Z's old boyfriends from high school was working at McDonald's. And I just smiled broadly, okay, and said, Z, suppose you had married him. She said, if I had married him, he would be a physicist at NASA and you would be flipping hamburgers at McDonald's.
Wow.
So short story is anything that I've accomplished has been because I've had the support. When I went to work for the Atomic Energy Commission, Z has never, ever done anything but be supportive of me, no matter where I moved, or what position I held. From Rochester, New York, to Cleveland, Ohio, to Manhattan, to Newark, New Jersey. She has just said, whatever it is you want to do, I'm there for you. And that's why I feel such an obligation to her. In this 59 years, she has suffered, okay, with me, and I've enjoyed every single moment of it with her.
Well, and obviously a good friend of yours, Curtis Smith, has asked the question. He wants to know, how can you be so brilliant and inspirational and also be such an extraordinary golfer? Now, you know, I've amended that question just a little bit.
I know you did for Curtis. Curtis is one of my surrogate sons. Curtis grew up across the street from us in Beechwood, is out in California with our younger son. Curtis, interesting, you would love this one. I'm a Kappa, of course, surrounded by Omegas. You, as my pastor in Omega, my previous pastor, Dr. Val Lassiter, was an Omega. Well, Curtis was at Howard University, and he was pledging Alpha. Curtis contacted me to ask me to write a letter in support of his pledging Alpha, because he said, they know you down here at Howard. Well, I wrote a letter supporting Curtis becoming an Alpha. Then at my retirement, Curtis spoke and said, I wrote the letter, but because I was a Kappa, they had to spell check the letter before they before they accepted it. But Julian and Greg and the circle of friends that they had here in Cleveland, those young guys have just been, Leon Anderson, Bruce Hamilton, but they have been extraordinary successes in their own right.
Okay. Another question has come. Dr. Earls, what are your thoughts about civilians going into outer space?
I believe that is appropriate. NASA has always formed partnerships with the private sector. Dr. Whitlow, and I tell you, I brag about him. Woodrow became the center director when I left. Well, when President Obama became president of the United States, I recommended Charlie Bolden, who was another good friend, a former astronaut, to become the administrator of NASA. He resisted, but he eventually became the NASA administrator. Mm-hmm. Well, what did he do? He reached into Cleveland and took Woodrow Whitlow from being the center director here and brought him to be the associate administrator for mission support. So here was Woodrow Whitlow out of Inkster, Michigan, out of high school, only applied to one university, MIT. He ends up going to NASA headquarters, administering a budget of $17 billion and a workforce of 17,000 people. Amazing. And Woodrow has never forgotten from whence he came. And those are the kind of people that have made a difference for us.
Thank you, thank you. We have a question that was submitted via email to us. What do you suggest parents in the lower rung of society do to encourage their children to pursue this field? The field, obviously, the field of science, physics, and aeronautics. How young to start? What type of financial support is available, regardless of age?
Well, firstly, I think that we have to sort of get away from this math is hard and science is hard. You see, we almost make students feel that it is okay not to do well in math. How often you hear people say, oh, I never was good in math. I can't even balance my checkbook and so forth. And that sends the wrong message that it is okay. We have to understand that we are capable as a people. You go back, you know, the pyramids didn't happen by accident. You look through the history of this world and the contributions that have been made by people of color. So firstly, we have to have the students believe it. The second thing we have to do is understand the importance of getting them started early, providing that support in early school, middle school, and so forth. Also, those of us who've met a modicum of success must be supported. It's not the wealth you accumulate, it's the wealth you share that makes a difference. Back in 1983, another graduate in HBCU, Hattie Carwell, and I formed a group called the Development Fund for Black Students in Science and Technology. We offer scholarships to Black students who attend HBCUs and major in STEM. When I was honored by you and Mount Zion as a trailblazer, I established the Zenobia and Earls Scholarship that gives a scholarship to a student at Howard University and a student at Norfolk State University. And I think Jamil, one of those students, is even witnessing this broadcast. And another young lady who is Gola, I believe she's witnessing the telecast. Those two most recent students to get the Zenobia and Earls Scholarship. So putting our money out there to make sure we help the students, and then being there to mentor and coach and support them.
I need you to know, Dr. Earls, that our viewing audience is gushing with praise for you. Many of them are your students, your mentees, those whose lives you have impacted. And I am fielding the questions through all of the praise that is coming. Just an unprecedented, I need you to know, an unprecedented amount of praise coming forth for you and all that you have done. A question came in: why was it important for you to ensure students have equitable assignments while on base? And that question comes from Mary McWilliams.
Let me tell you about Mary McWilliams. Mary McWilliams is, by the way, studying for the ministry now. She got her degree in engineering. She was one of my mentees at Cleveland, at NASA. Mary went on to become the national president of the National Society of Black Engineers. Her son just graduated in engineering from North Carolina A&T. She is an absolutely tremendous young woman, and she worked with our group, Entrepreneurial Engagement Ohio, to help our program get started in Columbus. And she's just tremendous in terms of technology, but tremendous young woman in terms of religiosity, if you will. And I've never been more proud of her. She was out in California and was responsible for my getting an award from the National Society of Black Engineers, but she has just given back, an example of what I'm talking about in terms of leadership, an accomplished engineer within the federal sector, but now about to become, get a Doctor of Divinity degree, by the way.
Dr. Woodrow Whitlow, a name that you have called numerous times this evening, has a question. Could you talk about the importance of being prepared for opportunities when they arise?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, it gets back to what I said originally, that if you concentrate on giving 100% where you are, then that's the best step in terms of preparation. But you also need to seek opportunities, accept opportunities. I received my doctorate at NASA through a program that NASA offers for anyone who wants to go on and work on a doctoral degree. You apply to universities around the nation. If you get accepted, then NASA sends you off for a year to work to attend the university to satisfy residency requirements. And then when you return, you get a year to complete your doctoral dissertation, which is related to NASA mission. And NASA pays you 100% salary the whole time you're doing that. Now, you're obligated to work for NASA for 3 times the length of time you were in school. But what's amazing is to have a program like that, and so few people seize and take advantage of those opportunities. There are also other programs for development. We have called a Senior Executive Service, a development program. One of the best decisions I made at NASA was not only hiring Ricky Shine, but Robin Gordon, who presented one of the master class a few years ago. Last year, I believe. Well, Robin came to work for me as head of our human services organization. I promoted her to be the chief diversity officer. Woodrow Whitlow came on board. He puts her in the SES development program. She becomes the first African-American senior executive service member at NASA Glenn Research Center, and now is the chief director of center operations. So preparation, what was it someone used to say, the 5 P's, proper preparation prevents poor performance.
That's right.
So
Exactly.
Those are the keys.
We had a member at our church that used to come and say that to me every Sunday. When she would say kind things about my sermons, that she would share with me that I had prepared, and that's why my message was passable on that day.
And I have to interrupt you on that case too, because not only yours are not just inspirational, they're informative and they're educational. And the other thing I do, I refer to you as the eagle eye pastor. That is, if you know something about the eye of an eagle, the eagle has 300 times as many visual cells per cubic centimeter as does the human eye, which results in some amazing ability. From 5 miles out, an eagle can spot a fish, 6-inch fish jumping in a lake. From 600 feet elevation, an eagle can spot an object the size of a dime in 3 inches of grass. And there are precious few people who have vision like that, who can see further than we mortals can. And you are one of those, because when you saw what could happen with the Christian Business League, when you and Mike Shin decided that this was an effort and this was a program that could work, that would tie Christianity with business, that was a kind of foresight that I'm sure you didn't imagine when you started years ago, that would end up where it is now. And when our dear friend Mike Shin, when he passed away, Joy Shin took that baton and has continued to run with it, and it's an absolute blessing.
Indeed, it's been an absolute joy to work with Joyce, because she has indeed caught the vision just as Mike did. And I always told the story, Julian, that and you talk about having people who know more than you do. When God gave me the vision for the Christian Business League, God also showed me Mike Shin. I tell that everywhere I go. God showed me Mike Shin. The first conversation that came forth out of my mouth about the Christian Business League was with Mike Shin. I said, Mike, this is an idea that I have. And it was obviously God's plan, because Mike had everything that we needed to make it happen. And so, and Joyce has just, as you say, Joyce has stepped up and done amazing work, just amazing work, as we continue to take the league to higher heights. And your involvement has made a difference, Dr. Earls. I've got so many questions here. This is, again, an unprecedented number of questions. Now, this one is from a young man who you know very well and who knows you very well. This question is from Gregory Earls. and I won't read the whole question. Some of it is just for you personally, but he has seen you mentor and has been impressed with your mentoring skills because so many of your mentees have gone on to do great things. And he wants to know what advice you would give to others about how to be a better mentor.
I just believe that you have to have an unlimited amount of humility about yourself. And then you must be willing to share, to go that extra mile. You really have to understand the value of preparation. And when I think about our sons, I couldn't be more proud. I tell you, when it comes to Gregory, I lean on him. And in fact, I lean on Julian and Greg and Pam though I'm the mentee and they are the mentors, as I need to get grounded on things and so forth. One short story I'll share is that I'm a marathon runner, and runners have a saying that the will to win means absolutely nothing if you do not have the will to prepare. And that means when we were getting ready for running marathons, Lana Reed, good friend of mine, we ran all 27 marathons step by step. But the training runs were more important than the day of the marathon. And so we would do 5 to 10 miles a day, and then 2 days a week we'd do a 20-mile run on a Wednesday and a 20-mile run on a Saturday, 3 months before a marathon. And Greg wanted to run a marathon in California, and he enrolled in a course on how to run your first marathon. Invited his old man to come out to Los Angeles and run the first marathon with him. And so he completed the marathon, and having that kind of dedication, determination, because see, there's something about the body stores 2,000 calories of energy. When you're running full tilt, you burn 100 calories per mile. That means at the end of 20 miles, you burn up the 2,000 calories of energy. You have nothing left, but you have 6 miles, 385 yards left, because the marathon is not 20 miles long, it is 26.2 miles long. And you have to run the last 6.2 miles on sheer intestinal fortitude, sheer determination. And what that teaches you is you can keep going a long time after you think you can't. Another thing, Reverend Paul, there are no atheists in the last few miles of a marathon. Everybody's praying. And the second time I ran Boston, mile 25, I looked up and I prayed, Lord, if you pick up my feet, I'll put them back down. So, okay. Okay. But yeah, I've been blessed. I've been infinitely blessed with people who supported me, with a family that has been there for me. And I'm just thankful every day.
My Zoom administrators are telling me that I have 2 more questions that I can ask you. First question is from Scott Ferguson, and that question is, what do you consider the next industry moving into the rest of this century that we as African Americans should dominate, as we tend to do?
Well, we really, really have to get involved in the cybersecurity world. You see, we cannot afford to become roadkill on the information highway. And since that world of IT is blossoming and blooming, then I think that's where we need to go. And Scott Ferguson is another one of my surrogate children. He and Mike and Margarita's mother, dear friend of Aziz, and his father and I were, brothers at NASA. When I came to Cleveland and went to work at NASA, the first person I met at NASA was Harold Ferguson. And Ferg picked me up and took me to work before I had a car. And he and Marguerite, brothers and sisters, and we know both Michael and Scott before they were born. So that's the relationship that we have with those two. And that's another thing, bonding with friends and family, that gives us strength. And you have to do that. You cannot do this alone.
And I have one more question that one and a half questions. You've spoken often about the value of time and not wasting it. Share your thoughts on that topic.
Well, I point out that the one thing that no one gets more than you, no one gets less than you, is time. And it's amazing how too many of us waste God's gift of time, that we can think about how we would spend financial resources.
Mm-hmm.
But we get 86,400 seconds every day. No one gets more, no one gets less. And we need to make sure that we set time aside to do those things that not only help us, but help others. It's the most precious gift of all. You can't buy it, but you can lose it, okay? You can waste it. But I maintain that thinking about and utilizing that most precious of God's gift should be high priority for us.
Amen. This is the last serious question I want to ask you, and that is, one of our panelists wants to know, what's next? You've accomplished so much, but you're full of energy, you're full of vitality. God has blessed you with your health, and you've got more mental capacity than most of us had in our 20s. So can you tell us what's next for you?
Well, as people say, God is not through with me yet, right? So I'm just here to just continue to serve and do as much as I can. You have twisted my arm and made me chairman of the board of trustees at our church. So I'm free labor there, right? With John Clipfield and Woodrow Whitlow and other members of the board of Entrepreneurial Engagement Ohio, with these funds that are coming in from the state of Ohio, working to get more of our students to understand the value of STEM and entrepreneurship and providing scholarships and support for them, moving our program from the high schools into the middle schools, and then continuing to do what I can to support those students who are attending HBCUs. Now, I have no difficulty with people attending predominantly white institutions, okay? We just have to make sure that students understand that there are choices. And so often at PWIs, students almost have to form an HBCU within them because they become members of the Black student unions and so forth. And they need to have some space. I was asked to come to the University of Cincinnati and speak on why they sit at separate tables. And my point was, there has to be some point, sometime on those campuses where students need to be in a risk-free environment and they don't have to walk on eggshells. And those separate tables for those students gathering is not anti-white students, anti-anything. It's just the need to be together and share common experiences and not have to watch what you say and do. I've gone on too long. Thank you for your time, Reverend.
We could go on all night, Dr. Earls. This has been a blessing. Hopefully we will be able to share with you the comments so that you'll be able to hear this. Our panelists are asking for the recording of this, and we will make this recording available to our participants, rather. We will make this recording available to our participants who have been a part of our time together tonight so that they will be able to utilize it, share it with others, because the wisdom that you shared with us tonight, Dr. Earls, is something that all of us can, number one, benefit from, number two, pass on. With many years ago, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who was then president of Morehouse College, had a student who came to him needing a scholarship. He gave the student the scholarship, and the student promised at the end of his tenure at Morehouse that he would pay the money back. When at the end of his tenure at graduation, the student had worked faithfully and saved all the money that Dr. Mays had given him. Dr. Mays said to him, when he came to him with the money in his hand at graduation, he said, Dr. Mays, here's all the money that you gave me. I worked hard, I saved the money so I could give it back to Morehouse College. And Dr. Mays said, you don't owe us anything, pass it on. And so, Dr. Earls, we're gonna pass on all that you have shared with us tonight. All that you have blessed us with, all that you have shared with us and how you have inspired us. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your sharing with us. At this time, Dr. Earls, if you have any concluding comments, please share them with us.
I just say thank you and thanks to everyone, and just make sure I remain on their prayer list.
Amen. Amen. And we have a special treat for you, Dr. Earls, and for all of our listening audience. We have a video tribute from the distinguished gentleman of spoken word here in Cleveland, Ohio, directed by Cuyahoga County's poet laureate, Honey Bell Bay. The distinguished gentleman of spoken word will come to us at this time.
A spoken word. A spoken word. I am high. I endeavor to be the best in every area of my life. I do not settle for mediocrity. I will not accept being labeled average. For average is merely the top of below average. Average is merely the surface of the bottom. I aim high. I aim high my education. I aim high my morality. I aim high my community. I aim high my home. And even when I miss the mark, I'll pick up the ball and I'll try again. I accept mistakes and I learn from them. But I will never accept failure because I am destined for greatness. Like a ball, I'll pick up life. I'll fix my eyes on the goal and I'll step forward. No, I'll run forward. And I choose to aim high.
This is our dogma.
What?
This is our creed.
What?
This is our pledge.
What?
This is our oath.
What?
So accept it.
What?
Believe it.
What?
Embrace it.
What?
We hold these truths to
Aim high.
The distinguished gentleman of spoken word, delivering I Aim High.
Good evening, everyone. What a blessing you have experienced, we have experienced this evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Earls. Before I move into the sponsors, I just wrote down a few words I wanted to share with you all. I know that there's plenty of accolades in the chat, but I just wrote down a few words as I was blessed by this evening. Humble, authentic, grounded, influencer, remarkably intelligent, eloquent, servant, genuine, visionary, encourager, family focused, and God-centered. So again, thank you so much. We couldn't do this without our wonderful sponsors. We are so blessed to have Gap Communications, of course, Mount Zion Congregational Church, the Women of Color Foundation, the Deaconess Foundation, Jumpstart, the Shin Family Charitable Fund, and of course, PNC. Again, we are so blessed to have the support of our sponsors. We could not do this work without the wonderful blessings that they have bestowed upon us. And if you are so interested and inclined to join us, make certain that you email us to figure out how you can too become a sponsor for us. Thank you so much. I think we are also going to move to upcoming events. Yes, we have a save the date. We have Alexandria Johnson Boone, who will be bringing our December masterclass to us. She is the president and CEO of Gap Communications Group, also chairwoman and founder of the Women of Color Foundation. We hope you plan to join us on Friday, December 3rd at 6 p.m. this time. It, again, will be virtual. We look forward to celebrating with you and Ms. Johnson Boone on December 3rd. So make sure you save the date. Thank you so much. And I will turn the floor back over to Reverend Sadler.
We are so grateful for all who have joined us on this masterclass this evening with Dr. Julian Earls. We hope that it's been a blessing to you, and we pray that something that you have heard tonight, something that Dr. Earls has shared with you, will help you as you continue to strive, as the distinguished gentlemen have said, to aim high, to become all that God is calling you to be in these challenging times. I pray God's richest blessing upon each and every one of you as we go forth tonight. Continue to be safe and well, and continue to do the work that God has called you to do, uplifting our community and making our world a better place, one life at a time. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.